going to disconnect. There's no IT faux pas I'm going to make here. Okay. This is not part of the presentation, but this is a picture that I took when I was in New York City. And I don't know if you can tell, it's the World Trade Center, the new World Trade Center. But I just love the contrast with this old building, this beautiful old building, and then this beautiful new building next to it. And it feels like we're kind of in that space again, you know, where we have a legacy, we have technology and infrastructure that has existed for a long time. And perhaps potentially, optimistically, we're now being faced with a new sort of technology that might be able to invigorate the way we do things, change business models. So I just had that on my background. It wasn't intentional, but I thought I'd make a comment on that. I'd first like to thank Saab Academy for inviting me here. It's always a privilege and an honor to address the Saab. Obviously, you know, the space that I'm involved in, you know, specifically around Bitcoin, you know, there's certainly feels like I'd be rubbing the Saab up the wrong way, and people like me who believe in Bitcoin, the Bitcoin aspect of this technology. So I'd like to just be here today to try and give you a kind of general overview. I think this presentation, I suspect, will be complementary to Monica's presentation. And by the way, Monica, I always love listening to you. You know, somebody who shares my passion. It's very exciting always to hear you, and I really appreciate that. And also Tim's comments today, I also thought were very insightful when it comes to what are the questions that we need to ask around this technology. And you know, it's important to realize that just because it's new and different and it doesn't fit within the way that things are happening right now, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. You know, if this technology can bring value to people, then of course we should consider it. So I'm pleased to see that the Saab is not just having a knee-jerk reaction saying this is outside of our ambit and we don't like it. Rather, they are engaging people who are involved in this space, trying to understand it, and you will be part of history, I think, you know, bringing in this new paradigm. So the talk today is, my presentation is about Bitcoin. Now, I want you to remember that there's two very clear different things when we talk about blockchain. There is blockchain, the technology, and I'm not going to be covering the technology, and then there's Bitcoin, an implementation of blockchain or an application of blockchain. And there are two very different things. Blockchain, as Tim said, is not something that you would typically regulate. It's a technology. And if it can be brought into your organization, and if it can make processes more efficient, if it can increase trust in the system or efficiencies, and it can reduce risk, then of course, you know, what's the point of thinking about it from a regulatory point of view and not a standards point of view? But Bitcoin is a completely different animal. Its aim is to create a system outside of any governable system. And so, of course, there's going to be questions around it and this feeling of discomfort. So I want to now just give you a sense of it today. This is going to be a 101. It is an introduction. I want to demystify how the whole process works. I will talk a bit about the way it works, which is kind of a blockchain discussion, but I want to make sure that it's not technical and it's framed in terms that you can understand. So it's going to be, you're going to see that it's not actually so wildly different from the systems that you already know and love and work with every day. You're going to see that it's just the same thing, really, but created or delivered in a different kind of way. So I'm going to now try and give you that perspective. And I'm sure after today you're going to feel confident that yes, you now get it and you understand why perhaps it is revolutionary and perhaps why it can add value to society at large going forward. And you know, things, you know, that you can now take away, and when you start thinking from a Saab point of view, you can now apply your thinking in a much clearer way. So just today, so this introduction, the outline is, I just want to talk about the history and motivation. So where did it come from? Why do we have this thing? You know, you're going to see that it didn't just come down from heaven. You're going to see that there's been lots of, or hell, maybe coming from hell. There's been lots of work in this space for actually decades. Bitcoin was decades in the making. You know, literally, ever since there have been networks and in the internet, people have been trying to make it. So it was inevitable that we had something like this. Also, I want to just talk about how it works. And I'm going to, as I said to you, talk to you and frame it in terms that you can understand. I'm not going to be technical, and I'm not going to use any jargon. All right, because I know that as soon as you bring in jargon, like I say something like crypto, you know, that's going to be a kind of mental block. I remember sitting in university, you know, whenever there was something I didn't get, it just turned me off the whole lecture. And then why it's important. You know, this is an important question. You know, why are people interested in this thing? Why are people thinking about it seriously and actually moving their wealth into this thing and wanting to use it? So we're going to have a look at why it's important. So the first thing, though, let's just get our nomenclature right, or our terms right. We've been saying digital currencies, and I know that I remember watching a talk from J.P. Morgan's Jamie Dimon, and he said that, listen, we have digital currencies, so what's the big deal? I think Paul Krugman also said that from the Wall Street Journal. We already have digital currencies. You know, if you've ever used a credit card, or if you've used a debit card, or if you've EFT'd money, you use digital currency. It's very rare nowadays, and we see trends around the world where we're moving away from physical paper notes. You know, there's a lot of issues with that. You know, they are inconvenient and expensive, and so digital currencies are things we already have. So Bitcoin isn't correctly termed as a digital currency because you're just being too vague. Nor is it a virtual currency. So I know that the paper is about virtual currencies, but a virtual currency is a kind of currency that exists within a closed ecosystem. So if you've ever played a computer game and there's a currency in that game, that's a virtual currency. And you can even argue that eBucks perhaps is a virtual currency. It works within a network of participants. So Bitcoin clearly isn't a virtual currency either, because it has much broader scope. So the word, when you hear it, when you want to refer to Bitcoin correctly, or these currencies, we use the word cryptocurrency. Now, I said to you I'm not going to use any jargon, but I'm going to introduce this one to you now. And crypto is just short for cryptography, something that has been used to secure banks and military for decades as well. And the word cryptography was used here just to show that it's different from a virtual currency. It is secured with the same technology that banks secure their infrastructure. And so maybe that can in some way give us a little bit of a sense of confidence that maybe this isn't just this a piece of tech that cannot be trusted. A lot of work has gone into making this thing something that can stand on its own, and using, as I said to you before, this has been decades in the making, technology that exists and is used in a widespread way. Okay, so if you want to sound clever at your cocktail parties, you're not going to refer to Bitcoin as virtual or digital currency. You can refer to it as a cryptocurrency. Okay, and then you can explain what I just said. So let's just look at how things are, or at least how things we understand things. We know that in a typical banking system or a financial services system, we generally have, if this is a banking system, we've got a system of record or bank accounts that are stored at the bank in a database. We have an account number. We have some maybe an identifiable some information like names, and then we have a balance. So that's just something that you understand. You know all about that. You know you have a ledger that stores information. And that database then is controlled and governed by the organization. And if you want to now make any changes to that information, you have to go via that organization. So this is something that you understand. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happens when somebody goes and makes payments. I know you know this. I'm just going to do this as a background because I'm going to then draw you into this new Bitcoin world to show you how similar the two things are, from the traditional to the new. All right. So if we have somebody who wants to go and purchase something from a merchant, all right, what they do is they're going to take their debit card or their credit card. But money doesn't flow from that debit card or credit card. There's not any thing that's actually going from that card into the merchant's account or into that little POS system. And this is how I always, back when I was a little kid, I used to think that's how it was. But we all know that what is actually happening is that there is an instruction that is being sent to the bank to say, listen, I want to now move a value out of my account. I want to debit a value out of my bank account, and then I want to have that value credited to the merchant account. Okay, so that is now how it exists currently. We have this authority, somebody's governing that database. They are receiving instructions, and the debits and the credits occur in that way. So if we were now to think about that merchant, again, in terms of a digital currency, for literally probably about 30 years now, people have been trying to come up with a way to say, listen, it would be nice if instead of always having to send an instruction to the bank, imagine if we could create a digital token. So something that I could actually have on my person, like a cash. So a digital cash token. And then what could happen is maybe the bank could issue that token. They could then send it to the person who owns that money. So now what's happened here is that in actual fact, value or a token that represents value or money has actually moved from the issuer to the person who now owns it. So now they are in control of that token. There's no bank account that is being linked to. They are now holding a digital token that represents cash. And this has been the goal of many computer scientists and economists and researchers. They've been trying to create this system. And then when that person wants to make a payment to the merchant, all they do is they go and send or transfer that digital token, that digital cash token, to the merchant. So this has been the aim, and this has been the goal. And there's been many attempts, and if you go back and you can see that there have been many companies who came up, and they came up with some version of this, and then something went wrong. You know, maybe they did step on the toes of a regulatory body, or maybe the technology didn't work so well. But the history over the last few decades is strewn with failed attempts at trying to create a digital cash, something that you can have and own, like you own a Rand note, and then you can transfer to somebody else in a peer-to-peer fashion. When we say peer-to-peer, we just mean directly from one person to another, or a person to a merchant, or between two organizations. Okay, and there's been a lot of failure. So how did, when Bitcoin came along, the guys who developed Bitcoin said, all right, we want to create the system, but how are we going to do this? There's so many of these different issues. And the solution is actually quite basic and quite simple, and you're going to see that it actually works exactly how a bank works today, where we still have this idea of a ledger, something that records accounts, it records a balance on those accounts, and then it records transactions. So it's not actually a token that is now being stored. When you have Bitcoin, if any of you have Bitcoin here, you don't actually have a token that is a Bitcoin. It doesn't exist. All you have is a claim to ownership on a ledger that is out there somewhere in the world. And I'm going to show you how that ledger works and how it's different from the ledger that is at this institution. So what happens at this point now, I'm now going to be referring, this is now talking about Bitcoin. We still have our ledger. All I've done now is I've just removed the R from the account, and we've got an account number and we have a number. Okay? So we can call that number whatever we like, and we know that there are many different currencies out there, like Bitcoins and Ether and Litecoin. There's a whole lot of them. So I just want us to move away from the actual, what we're going to call that number. Here we have a ledger on that account. But there is no central organization that is holding that ledger. This is the most important thing now. First of all, you don't have a token that represents that money. You just have an entry in a ledger, and you have a claim on that ledger. Now I'll show you how that works. Then, what happens now is that whenever in a banking system, you need to have computers that are processing these transactions. You know, if I send an instruction to my bank to say, please go and debit my account, we know that there's a computer sitting out there processing that information, making sure that I have the right amount of money, making sure that I am the owner of that account, and making sure of a whole lot of other things. But the way Bitcoin works, and the way that these cryptocurrencies work, is they say, we're not going to have a central organization that is now managing this ledger. What we're going to do is we're going to allow volunteers from all around the world to now contribute their laptop or their data center or whatever it is to this big network. And what we're going to do is we're going to split that ledger up and distribute it amongst every one of those participants, let's call them. So now we don't even have a location where that ledger is stored. And this is why it's so difficult, I think, when it comes to, you're going to see, when it comes to regulating Bitcoin itself, it's practically impossible because we don't have a jurisdiction. All we have is thousands of volunteers with all sorts of different computers. Maybe some even, we're hearing now how some companies are allowing you to do this transaction processing on your items in your house, like maybe your light bulbs or your fridge, where there can be a little microchip that is doing this. So it's a completely distributed and a decentralized network that's processing these transactions. And then by doing that, by contributing your computer and your processing power to this network, you're not just going to do it for free. The way that the network works is that everybody who now contributes resources to this network will be incentivized to do so by earning value or earning numbers again. And in this case, we're talking about Bitcoin. So if that computer over there processes a transaction, okay, this is very simplified because it's a little bit more complicated how it processes it, but it's for the purposes of this talk, it's just processing a transaction. If that computer over there processes a transaction, they get a new value that is now added to this network. So it is quite an incredible thing that occurs over here, where we have this kind of self-regulating, self-incentivizing, self-motivating network where people are earning numbers at the end of the day. And those numbers are now flowing into this ledger, and they can then have a claim of ownership on that. So the craziest thing about something like Bitcoin is that there is no coin. There is no thing. All it is just this ledger that records numbers. Okay, and now you can call those numbers money. You can make a decision about whether you want to do that, but this is how it works, and this is how it exists. And the most important word that I can throw out when we're talking about these types of things, the blockchain and cryptocurrencies, is this word decentralization. If you don't have a decentralized network, in other words, if we have all these participants who are collaborating together and all trust each other, then it loses that decentralizing element, and actually, by definition, it stops becoming a blockchain. Now, I know that you'll probably find that there's a lot of people who talk about these things saying, why should we have, or how could we have a network of people who all trust each other collaborating on a blockchain? You're going to see that there's a lot of debate around this. But the technology that makes this possible, this decentralized network, is actually the innovation that Bitcoin came up with, a thing that we never had before. This ability to create a network where we don't trust everybody, we don't know all these participants that are joining this network. We don't know who they are. But Bitcoin, the technology that makes it possible, and the blockchain that makes it possible, allows us to enforce trust through various mechanisms. Okay, so that is essentially what it is. If you ever think to yourself, what is Bitcoin and what is a blockchain, this is actually all it is. We have this big decentralized ledger out there just recording the movement of numbers from one entry on a ledger to another entry. And that's essentially all it is. Now, why people are adding monetary value to these numbers, I guess we can explore that now. And you can make that determination on your own. We know that, as some said, fiat currencies, there's an important thing about currencies. They need to have store of value. There should be a medium of exchange. What I'm going to do next is try and argue and tell you why people are starting to think, including myself, that Bitcoin is a form of money. These numbers can be considered a form of money. All right, so we're going to explore that. So let's just another expansion on that ledger. What we have on this ledger is not just an account and a number. We also have transactions. These are what happens moving money from one person to another. And just the way that Bitcoin works and cryptocurrencies work is that every period, every so often, maybe every 10 minutes, or in some blockchains it's different. What happens is these transactions are all grouped together and then processed at once. And then the next group of transactions will come in and get processed. And that's why we call this thing a blockchain, because we have a block of transactions and then another block of transactions, and they're kind of chained together. Okay. So if ever you thought blockchain was complicated and confusing, if you thought Bitcoin was difficult to understand, if you understand anything that I've said now, you understand Bitcoin and you understand blockchain. Okay, so this is now just a picture of a true cloud. Bitcoin can be considered, and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin can be considered a real cloud. Now, when we talk about cloud, if you're not an IT person, whenever we think of cloud, we just know that there's servers out there on the internet and they're doing stuff for us. But those aren't real clouds. What's happening is you're just connecting to some computer that's on some network somewhere. But Bitcoin can be considered a real cloud, because if any one of those computers that are processing these transactions and storing the transactions, if any of them go down, it makes no difference. You know what? You could have 99% of all the computers that are processing Bitcoin transactions go down, and you'd still have Bitcoin running. So it's a very important decentralized and distributed network. But now the cool thing is that now we have a big public resource that any one of us can tap into and use, just like the internet. You know, the internet isn't, there's no permission. If you wanted to use the internet today, all you need to do is you just need to find a device that can access the internet. If you wanted to now put on create a website, you don't have to ask permission from anybody to create the website. You just get a computer and you set up a web page and connect it to the internet, and boom, you're on. So Bitcoin can be considered a public resource. We now, all of us, have access to this ledger. And we can now go without permission, without any forms to fill in, we can go and access this public ledger. And we can now go and transact. And it's not stoppable. You know, as I said before, if half the network goes down, if let's say one of our internet cables goes down, it makes no difference. If there is one computer on the network that is running this thing, we have access to Bitcoin. So you can see that it's going to be a very difficult thing from a regulatory point of view to now try and insert yourself there with your own feelings to say, listen, we don't like the way Bitcoin is doing this. We don't like what people are doing with Bitcoin. It's going to be impossible for us to ever change how this works, or create some kind of framework that we can control how people interact with this network. It's like a wild animal that's been set loose. All right. So the thing that we should then think of is that, all right, we have this resource. What can we do with it? Now, I've been seeing a lot of articles lately about how people are even suggesting that central banks use this as a kind of foreign exchange platform. It's like a global platform that everybody has access to. It's not controlled by some entity that maybe another entity would have issue with. We now have access to, just like we have access to the internet, and we can now create sites, we can connect to people, we can communicate. Well, now we have this public resource, and anybody can go and connect to it. It can be an individual and it can be an organization. All right, so it is quite a phenomenal thing, and I think my original, when I proposed to Gabby what would my presentation be titled, I said the Bitcoin wood for the blockchain trees. Do you know that phrase, we're missing the wood for the trees? I think that there's been so much focus over the last 2 years on the technology that makes Bitcoin possible, where we're forgetting that we have this incredible resource, something that I believe is going to fundamentally change the world. I think that blockchain itself is very interesting, and it has incredible opportunities to change business models, disrupt businesses, and create new opportunities for businesses. But I don't think that it's those sorts of things are going to change kind of the lives of people. Maybe it'll change the ways we interact with our services and all that sort of thing. But with Bitcoin, I believe that this is going to fundamentally change the fabric of society, where we can now transact value in a public way without any fetters. Now, I know saying that to the Saab sounds horrific, But times change, and perhaps this is not necessarily an evil that is going to destroy the world as we know it, but perhaps create new opportunities for things that we never thought were possible. Okay, so this is just my feeling that I don't want you to discount Bitcoin. It doesn't seem that it's going away anytime soon. And on its own merit, right now, a lot of this blockchain development that is going on and these POCs and the potential use cases that are happening, none of them have worked out so far. Of course, it's early days. And of course, with technology, you need to understand the technology to see how it works. But we're not anywhere yet with blockchain. When I last addressed the SARB, I was fortunate to address Mr. Morgan Pillay up at almost the top floor, and he said, well, what can we wait and see, and what should we look at right now? And I said, well, the blockchain is something that we're all waiting and seeing for. I mean, there's nothing out there that is now impacting people's lives. But Bitcoin itself is. And that is something that, in fact, if you were to think about a focus, if you were to now go leave here today and say, right, what am I going to concentrate on? I would say, this is what you should do. People are using Bitcoin. It is working. It's been working for 8 years now, and it hasn't failed yet. Of course, it has issues and limitations, just like any technology. But that is the real thing that is going on right now. Blockchain, who knows? Who knows if any of these dreams and hopes that we have for blockchain are going to be realized? I actually think that we're going to be surprised. I think that the things that blockchain are going to impact we haven't even thought of yet. In the same way, in the 90s, we had no idea there's going to be such a thing as social media. I think blockchain will surprise. Okay, but just to give you another kind of technical sort of thing about the way Bitcoin works, is that, as you can see, Bitcoin isn't stored on somebody. Nobody owns, you're not in physical possession of your Bitcoins. It's not a digital token. But the one thing that you do need to have in Bitcoin land is, it's kind of like a password, or what's called a key. And that is the thing that you will have possession of. And all that gives you is the right to access your Bitcoin account to make transactions. Okay, so again, it's a difficult thing to think of, because there's no place that Bitcoin exists. If a country says, well, we're going to regulate Bitcoin here, if Bitcoin is in this country, you're not allowed to send it out of this country, that makes no sense. All right, Bitcoin doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It exists everywhere in the world, and there's no jurisdiction. The only thing that you have is your right to access your account, which is called that key. Okay, so let's just quickly explore why Bitcoin. Why are people thinking about Bitcoin as money? Why are they moving out of fiat, taking their hard-earned rands and hard-earned dollars and every other country whatever they earn, currency they earn, why are they taking those valuable notes and turning them into Bitcoin? And this is now what I want to just talk about. I want to talk about the characteristics of Bitcoin that makes it worthwhile considering as an alternative currency, or at least not so much a currency, but a money. And there's a difference. Okay, and I'm going to explore those two. So let's have a quick look at the properties. I know I just said to you it's just a number in a database online, but what are the characteristics of that number? And why should we think about it seriously? And why should we even go away today and think about investing in some of these things? I hope some of you do. Okay, so the first thing is it has properties of money. We heard just now that what makes something money is a unit of account. Now, just to contribute to what was said earlier, a unit of account is kind of like a unit of measure. It just measures the value of things. And Bitcoin being a number makes it easy for you to value items. Okay, so that's your unit of account. Medium of exchange. We see that it's a big network, and it's very easy to transfer numbers from one person to another. It's a fantastic medium of exchange. It's digital. Okay, we have digital currency today, but Bitcoin has those properties. But now, that's just as a currency. But what are the properties that makes it more of a kind of money, that store of value that was spoken of earlier? Well, Bitcoin kind of has the same properties as gold. Now, I know that we don't have a gold standard anymore, and for the last 45 years, we've been cultured into thinking gold isn't money. I believe that we are eventually going to go back to that again, believing and remembering that gold is money. But what is the things that makes gold a store of value, because gold for thousands of years has been money and has been a great store of value, much better than any fiat currency you could care to name. Well, the thing that makes something a store of value, at the end of the day, it boils down to its scarcity. You know, if you have something that has an infinite supply, of course it's not going to be valuable. But if you have something that has limited supply, that's what gives something a store of value. If any of you are collectors, if you collect stamps or whatever it is, you know, or furniture at antiques, you know that those very rare items are very valuable. And that's what makes a currency like Bitcoin a store of value, because it has a limited supply. So we have those, unit of account. And then there are others. You know, it's divisible, it's durable, it lasts. There's so many of these things. So we can really think about Bitcoin as kind of olden days money. It's almost like Bitcoin isn't so new. It's almost taking us back to how it once was, where now we have, and a lot of people are saying, a digital form of gold, because Bitcoin acts just like gold, except it's better than gold because it's digital. It's a much better medium of exchange. But now there's a lot of other things going on around the world. I mean, if any of you are millennials or below, I saw this article the other day that says millennials would rather go to the dentist than stand in a bank queue. And we see with all these little fintechs that are coming up, you know, they're focusing heavily on these young people. You know, they don't have a sense of trust in the traditional banking system. You know, in fact, to them it's almost abhorrent. You know, this giant building and people in suits. You know, they're much more inclined to adopt these newfangled things, these new systems. So they say certainly Bitcoin as this kind of alternative to the system is very attractive. So, the reason I put this up here is because that's a force that we have to reckon with. I mean, all of us, you know, I'm 40 now. I'm not, I guess, a youngster anymore. You know, so I'm sort of set in my ways. But we must never discount young people and the things that they think of and the things that they are interested in. That's why I put it in there. But now there's all sorts of infrastructure that's being put up around it. You know, when you look at all the currency exchanges, I mean, we have one in Cape Town, Luno now. It used to be called BitX. We have a Bitcoin exchange in this country. In fact, we have 3. Bitcoin exchanges are popping up all around the world. People are wanting to speculate on this because it does have value. And if something has value and you can speculate, great. Well, the people are going to want to make money. A lot of the price is driven by speculation, but there are some people, and myself included, that believe that this has a long-term prospect, being deflationary because it's limited supply. I want to invest long-term. So now we have these currency exchanges. But then it goes even crazier than that. Just recently, a few days ago, an investment trust was listed on the New York Stock Exchange. That is a Bitcoin investment trust. There's a very famous bunch, the Winklevoss twins, who started Facebook. They want to create an ETF with Bitcoin. So, you know, these very kind of traditional players or plays, Bitcoin is now being brought into that. Very important. Now, this is something that might not make immediate sense to you, but when I say programmable, Bitcoin being a technology makes it very easy for you to code payment instructions into the technology itself, that you can perhaps, you know, there's this whole thing about the Internet of Things, and the story that I always hear is that when your fridge runs out of milk, then it can go and buy some milk for you, but none of us are going to want to give our credit cards to the fridge. So what you can perhaps do, and this is what makes Bitcoin so interesting as money, is that you can actually take software and program payment into it, but it's not just payment instructions, it's actual moving value from one thing to another, and you can code that directly into the Internet of Things. So very important quality that makes it far more useful as money than the digital currencies we have today. Another cool thing is when you go, if you go to the merchant and you go and pay for something at the merchant, remember that's a pool that's going on. That merchant is pulling money out of your credit card. Suddenly now you have recourse to say, well, I didn't want that pulled out of, I didn't give permission for you to pull money out of my account. And that introduces all those issues with chargebacks and so on. Bitcoin is a push mechanism. If I want to pay you, I push money to you instead of me handing you my wallet and saying, please take what I owe you, and you know, don't lose my information. Bitcoin is a push mechanism, irrevocable, indisputable. A very important quality, and why merchants are actually gravitating towards us. They like the idea of they can have a payment, electronic payment that cannot be disputed. A very important thing. Sorry, that was that item over there. And it's peer-to-peer. Remember, if I'm now making a transaction, if I'm sending you money, I'm not going through an intermediary that potentially can restrict that payment, charge a fee on that payment. Of course, there's fees involved in cryptocurrencies, but those fees are going to a sort of good cause, to sustain the network. But a very important quality. And remember, for the last 30 years at least, people have been trying to come up with a digital peer-to-peer cash. And we have this global platform. It is everywhere. It is now being accepted in all sorts of places. There is no concept of geography, and that is very attractive to many people. Of course, from capital controls and all that sort of thing, it's not so cool. But from just a user experience, if I want to send money to Zimbabwe, it goes directly to that person. I don't have to trust that set of intermediaries that add delays and huge fees. Okay, and then of course merchant acceptance. Which is what I was talking about with the push. And now my company is actually involved in this. In fact, we're engaging the SARB on how to push this forward. But just like when you go to a merchant and you pay with SnapScan, it's very easy to go to a merchant and say, all right, well, there's a Bitcoin QR code, and I can now go and make my payment. The fees are lower, so the merchant is happy, and that is a push payment, so I'm happy. I know that my credit card information isn't being exposed or being held by anybody. So you're going to see that this is, and I'm moving heavily into the space. I feel like this is a very important thing that's missing with Bitcoin. Earlier on, we have Bitcoin. What do we do with it? So this is an important step. Being so early on in the history of this thing, these things don't exist yet, but they will, and they are growing. And eventually, the question of, well, what do I do with my Bitcoin once I have it, won't be a question. You will be able to go to Spar or Woolworths or whatever and pay for your groceries using Bitcoin. Very possibly, hopefully, hold thumbs, end of the year, maybe next year, who knows. Okay, but it's happening. But time is moving on. So we have now this very good form of money, very safe and secure, no boundaries, no limitations, and now usable in our day-to-day lives. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of the Lunar exchange. Okay, so you can come in and buy your Bitcoins on the exchange. But now, why are people moving out of Bitcoin? And moving out of fiat. And this is a list, and I remember showing this list to the executives last year, and I had a feeling of like, I don't really want to show this. But these are very real issues that are happening around the world today that are making people feel uncomfortable with the existing system. So the first one, negative interest rates. Now for me, I don't think there can be such a thing as a negative interest rate. Surely there's no such thing as a negative interest rate. It's just a charge. But now money, if you have savings, you're being charged for it. It's more worth your while to take your money and put it under the mattress, literally. Okay, so this is a trend that is happening around the world. Plus, it's probably not over yet. It might even get worse. Then we've heard about all the bank bail-ins and likelihood of bank bail-ins. Some central banks or banks have it as part of their new rules. They're saying, listen, if we need to, we're going to bail in. We're going to take depositors, give depositors a haircut. This is an issue. It happened in Greece, and people are worried about this. What do you do with your money? Hyperinflation, it's happening. It's not just Zimbabwe and an outlier. In the last 100 years, there have been 57 now cases of hyperinflation. The 57th, Venezuela. And it doesn't look like that's going away anytime soon, and other countries are at risk of that too, with all this quantitative easing. Bailing out the banks. 2008, that's what spurred this whole Bitcoin thing on. Capital controls. There's news of China. There's heavy capital controls. Chinese people are thinking, how do we get our money out of the country? It's very difficult. Oh, look, Bitcoin is an option. Again, I'm not saying that is good. I'm not saying that it's good that these guys can now just do that. I don't want you to think that I'm an anarchist or anything like that. But these are the things that people are thinking of. The unbanked. 80% of Africans are unbanked. They don't have access to e-commerce or being able to transact conveniently without cash. Cash is inconvenient and it's insecure. And then finally, trust. Just general trust. Now, some of you might think that these aren't real issues, but these are issues that if you do a survey around the world and you just look at trends and you look at sentiment, these issues come up. And we cannot discount them. So people are thinking about, it's not just Bitcoin is a better technology. In fact, it's not. Bitcoin right now is a worse technology. It's slow, In other words, to make sure that your payment is final, you have to wait at least half an hour. The fees aren't actually that low. Sometimes for small value transactions they are quite high. So Bitcoin isn't a better technology that everybody's looking at and saying, "Oh my goodness, Bitcoin is fantastic. It's so great. I'm going to move into it." They're actually being pushed into it, and this is just a global trend, a macro trend that we mustn't discount at all. All right. Now, if we just look at some of the metrics, and I'm almost done here, giving you this whole thing. This is just a chart from a popular blockchain Bitcoin wallet, and we can see how just that trend is showing you how people are getting wallets. I hope all of you have a Bitcoin wallet. Hopefully you're on the Wi-Fi, right? You can download a Bitcoin wallet. But this is growing. This is just one Bitcoin offering, but there are so many Bitcoin wallets that are being created. So many people are starting to download it. This is a transactions per day. We can see that the trend is up. So people are transacting more and more. Now it's about 278,000 transactions a day. All right, very low. I mean, Visa probably does more than 10 times that. That's just Visa. So we can see that the trend is moving in this direction. And then this is a technical thing, but this just shows you, remember I said that the way that Bitcoin transactions are processed is by volunteers around the world. This is just a chart showing you how many volunteers are piling in to try and make some money by processing transactions. So by every single metric that we can look at, the world is moving in this direction. Now what that means for the way things are from a regulatory point of view and from an institutional point of view, factor this in. Realize that the times are changing and people are moving in this direction. Okay. Now, that's not to say, I've spent the whole time saying that you cannot regulate this, but there are ways to do this, and I think that, and I know Narishka is going to touch on the regulatory aspects, but I'm just going to add my thoughts around this just briefly, is that there are ways for there to be some oversight, some measure of control about what's going on here. Now, I showed you that merchants are beginning to accept it. People are purchasing Bitcoins on exchanges or selling Bitcoins on exchanges. So those perhaps are the places, and we see that even though that none of those regulations are really enforced, Luno does request FICA information when you want to go and buy Bitcoins or sell Bitcoins. They're doing that as a preemptive measure, but those are the places that perhaps you can introduce some kind of oversight. If people are moving money, it's the on and off ramps. If you are moving value out of the system that exists in the traditional system into the system, then that is perhaps a place that you can now insert yourselves and then find out what's going on and apply whatever measures need to be applied. But I have to be frank and honest, once it's out of that, then it's out in the world. All right, and that's just how it is. Okay. Not to be pessimistic or anything, but there are ways that there can be some measure of control. But also, not just to react to it, to actually go out and say, listen, the only thing we can do right now is to go find those companies that are offering these services to people. And we go to them, and we go to the world, and we say, look, we are going to encourage those sorts of businesses. We're going to give them a framework that they need to follow. And we're going to give our stamp of approval if they follow those requirements. And then that means that more of those companies will start being created. More services will be built around Bitcoin itself, which means you will have the ability now to regulate much more of what's going on in that world. Because if you don't do that, if you are reticent, and you say, well, we don't really like what that guy's doing, but we're just going to let it happen until something goes wrong, then what's going to happen, or worse, if you come down on those companies and say, listen, we just don't like the fact that you're dealing with Bitcoin, we're going to not allow you to exist. All that's going to happen is that it's going to be driven underground into a place that you'll never have any oversight whatsoever. There are already many anonymous and open source wallets that exist out there, so anybody can now go and transact. But if you now come forward and say, we are encouraging this, we want business to develop because now we can move in on that business and we can see exactly, we can make sure that that business knows who their customers are and we can see how much money is flowing in and out of the system. That I think is going to be the best way to go forward in this. So actually come out and say we are positive, and we are encouraging this. So react positively, proactively. Okay, so that's that. I just want to quickly talk about the Bitcoin price, because being a Bitcoin believer, often people talk to me about the volatility and they say, listen, sure, okay, I get that it's finite and that is theoretically gives something a store of value, but hang on, it's so volatile. So it's a store of value, but it's not a very good store of value. You know, it's up and down. So this is just a picture of the Bitcoin price over the last few years. In fact, it's actually reached practically the all-time highs. So this is a bit of an older chart. But it just illustrates a point that I want to make, that whenever there is a new technology, there's a very clear pattern that always forms when a new technology is introduced on the scene and there's an adoption. And we saw this happen with the internet when it came along. There was this thing called the NASDAQ stock. Remember the bubble that happened, the dot bomb that happened. You can see how the red being the NASDAQ price, you can see how it forms almost exactly the same pattern. That pattern occurs time and time again, and many people have looked at this and modeled it, and most famously this pattern has been modeled by Gartner. They call that the hype cycle, and we can see that Bitcoin itself is following this hype cycle. And I think, and Gartner says that blockchain is at the peak of that bubble. So it looks like we might be facing some disappointment when it comes to the blockchain and all these POCs and all these use cases that are being pushed forward. But to me, Bitcoin is beyond that. I think Bitcoin we've gone through the trough of disillusionment, which is that thing, and we're now onward and upward. Okay, and I'm just going to finish off now with the one thing that I see that central banks are perhaps entertaining. And now this is out of the realm of kind of how I imagine this, but it's a government Bitcoin, a Gov coin or a ZAR coin or a Rand coin or something like that. Central banks are talking about this. There's some central banks around the world that are considering issuing their own cryptocurrency, and they say there's a lot of benefits to that. Maybe you can explore that in a paper. You can publish it and become famous as somebody who's figured this out. But these are the things. But of course, there's going to be a lot of issues around that. Narishka definitely is going to cover that from a legal point of view and regulatory point of view. So I'll leave that with her. But I hope that kind of gives you a sense of, okay, I get now what's going on, and I'm not so flummoxed, and we can move forward with our lives. And if there's any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them. Thank you. Am I free to go? Yes. Have you a question? You're stretching. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. So what you're going to have to do is, if you own Bitcoin, is you're going to have to go and sell it to somebody. Now, you can either do that, you can sell it to me, and I can come to you with brands, or you can go to a marketplace like an exchange, an online exchange. And we have a very good one in Cape Town called Luno, which was called BitX. So what you'll do is you'll go and deposit your Bitcoins on the exchange, and you will then do the whole offer bid thing. You can either sell it at the market rate, or you can say, I only want to sell my Bitcoin when it reaches 20,000 Rand. And then you'll post your order there, and then it'll settle when it's matched. So that's probably the best way of doing it today.
Okay, thanks. My second question is, you said there's a limited supply.
Yes.
What do you mean by that? Because it's
Yes.
something out of the air, so I can't see how it's...
Right. So remember when I showed you that all those computers out there that are processing transactions, what happens is whenever they process a transaction, they get rewarded for that effort with new Bitcoins that come into the system. So whereas let's just say there are 1 million Bitcoins today in existence, then as soon as you process a transaction, what will happen is suddenly now there'll be 1,000,012. Right now it's about 12.5. So that process is going on, and there's actually a very fixed rate of supply that can be modeled, where every couple of years what's going to happen is that reward that you get for processing a transaction is going to halve, and then halve, and then halve until it gets to zero. And they say that is only going to happen in 2140, when we get to the limit, which is going to be 21 million. Now, I just want to talk about that 21 million. A lot of people say, 21 million? Hang on, whoa. If everyone in South Africa had a Bitcoin, we'd run out of Bitcoins pretty quickly. But one of the important things about money is that you can divide it down. So with gold, as we've seen, as gold becomes more valuable, you can melt down your ounce into a half ounce, you can melt it into a quarter ounce, and so on. So Bitcoin is like that. It's kind of like a rand. You can have a rand or you can have a cent, a hundredth of a rand. The way Bitcoin works, and other cryptocurrencies are similar, is that you can also have a cent of a Bitcoin. But instead of a hundredth in Bitcoin, it can be a millionth. But it also can go down as the value of Bitcoin increases. So there's 21 million fixed supply. Let's say Bitcoin now encompasses let's say it replaces the entire global financial system, and it now needs to be worth trillions in value. Well, then we won't be transacting in 1 Bitcoin for a cup of coffee. We'll be transacting in 0.00000001 Bitcoin. Okay. So the point isn't so much the number 21 million, it's the fact that it is limited, and it's the same as gold. Gold is a limited supply. We don't know how much there is, but we know it's limited.
And then my last question, with all this hacking and things, you said that you need storage of a key.
Yes.
If you have your key and you forgot your key, how do you retrieve it? And if you can easily retrieve it, why can somebody else not retrieve it?
Right. So now with Bitcoin, there's two things here. Either you can, and they say you can be your own bank, which means that you can hold your keys, all right, and look after them. But if you lose them, too bad, that you shouldn't have lost them. Or what you could do is you could say, I don't trust myself to hold on to this key. I'm going to give it to a trusted third party, a custodian, who will now, I can trust that will look after those keys. So if I make a mistake, it's not going to matter. So the hacks that we refer to, because we know that Bitcoin is famous, there have been some famous hacks. What happened was, it wasn't that Bitcoin got hacked, but the custodians who were holding keys on behalf of people got hacked. They were storing those keys in a database that wasn't secure. Somebody found, hacked into that database, stole the keys, and then were able to steal money off the Bitcoin. So Bitcoin hasn't been hacked, but if you are going to entrust your money with somebody else, you've all got to make sure that that person is going to look after your money properly. But right now we have a bank to do that for us with our traditional money. With Bitcoin, you can look after them yourself, if you want to. If not, then you can go to a service provider like Luno, the exchange in Cape Town. They will look after your keys for you. Yes?
My question relates to your comment about Bitcoin giving a soul value. So the point with fiat currencies right now, one of the big problems is they're not based on anything, so they're just a number that someone thought of some way. And I know you mentioned something about scarcity, right? But I sort of disagree with that in the sense that if you are to compare it with gold, for example, so if we were to go way back in history before money was anything, so if I had a cow and you had maize, for example, and I wanted maize and you wanted some meat, then we could exchange that thing. So when people came up with money, they say we want something that's standard that we can exchange. And then gold was convenient in the sense that gold was also one of the commodities that people wanted. So gold is useful in making jewelry, it's malleable, and so people wanted gold. So because it was divisible and it was something that you could attach value to it, that's how gold came to being money. But now Bitcoins are not something that, they're not a commodity that one would want, they're just number in the system. So I would say they're a very good form of currency. But when the first Bitcoin was created, how did it become a store of value? Like what value was transferred from, which commodity was transferred into the Bitcoin for it to become a store of value?
Okay, so I won't comment on your fiat currency about how it's not backed by anything. Technically, it's not, but it is in a way. Remember, fiat currencies are backed by faith and credit on the country, the ability to tax its citizens and to be economically viable. So I wouldn't say that fiat currencies aren't backed by anything. But yes, of course, they don't have themselves any intrinsic value. But now, going to your gold question, because I like the analogy between Bitcoin and gold, because I do see a very close similarity there. Now, gold, because it had certain properties, not not because it was useful in itself. In other words, jewelry. Remember, jewelry is money. It's wearable money. And if you think about, in India, when your dowry is gold jewelry, but it's not to make you look pretty. It's your value. It's your wealth. So gold itself is a famous kind of metal because it's not useful. Of course, maybe you can put it in your teeth or you can put it on a spaceship, but it's not actually valuable because it's useful in and of itself. But it's almost like an ideological thing, where gold, because of its properties being finite, but also as a good medium of exchange, you can transport it, it's durable, it's divisible, all these different things that are important when it comes to a good form of money. Gold is the best physical form of money that we've ever had, and that's why it's been valuable. And the store of value, the fact that it has all those things, but the fact that it's valuable is because it's very rare. That at the end of the day, the value of gold can be distilled down into those few things. It is a very good form of money, unless you're in a digital world, and it is very rare. So now, when the first person found a nugget of gold on a riverbed, there was no commodity or something that came along and said, all right, I'm going to now back this gold with this thing. Gold's not backed by anything. Gold is intrinsically valuable, unlike our fiat currency. And fiat currency is just a piece of paper. In the olden days, fiat currency was backed by gold, which meant that it was valuable because of what it represented. But gold is just, because of human nature, because of its usefulness as a form of money, because of its rarity, for thousands of years people have considered it valuable and a good form of money. And the ability to now meet that coincidence of wants that you're saying, where you have now a cow and you have wheat. Well, I don't want a cow for my wheat, so let's now use a kind of universal form of money. So Bitcoin has the same thing. Bitcoin is a fantastic form of money. It is durable and divisible and a medium of exchange, a unit of account, exactly like gold, and it is rare. So if you were to ever wonder why Bitcoin is value, then you've got to say, well, why does gold have value? And all we can say is gold has value because it is useful as money and because it's rare. And that exactly the same principle can be applied to Bitcoin. Now, of course, being in a digital world now, maybe we are all over the hill or whatever it is, but where we feel like the only thing that can have value is something that's tangible. A lot of people say, but I can see gold, I can feel it, I can put it in my pocket. That's just a legacy of where we've been. We are all new to this digital world, but I can guarantee you, my children included, they don't have the sense that if it's digital, it's worth less. I mean, their lives are digital, their friends are digital, their communications, everything that they do is in a digital world. So for there to be money as digital, it's just a natural extension. So I think we should think like that. Think like a child. Remember, Monica said it. Open your mind. Think like a child, and you'll suddenly see how it makes sense, in a perfect sense, in the world that we live in today. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Lauren, for the presentation. I just have two questions. First one is regarding how is Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin determined in a single currency? And that question is due to the fact that if I can buy Bitcoins in rands, I can also buy Bitcoins in US dollars. Is there a situation where you can get foreign currency arbitrage because the value of Bitcoin in rands is different from that Bitcoin in euros?
Yes, so the value is based purely on supply and demand. So you'll notice where in some countries, like in India when the demonetization was happening, and I don't remember putting that on the list, war on cash, you saw that people were starting to buy Bitcoin, but now there were very few people who had Bitcoin in India, and so the demand was much higher than the supply, and suddenly the market value of those Bitcoins was going a lot higher as compared to maybe in South Africa. Because there's more supply here, and people are, remember, it's on an exchange, it's a free market, so free market dynamics. Now, of course, yes, there is an opportunity to arbitrage. If you have the ability to buy Bitcoins in South Africa and go and sell them on the exchange in India, you can make a tidy profit, and people are doing that. That's a very real thing. In fact, there are fintech companies now who are saying, all right, we've got a cool idea. Let's allow people to remit cash. What they'll do is come to me in South Africa. They'll give me $100. I will then buy 100 rands worth of Bitcoins here, and now they want to send that money to India. I'll send the 100 rands worth of Bitcoins to India, and I'll sell it for 120. And I'll make 20 rand on just the arbitrage. And then I can go to my customer and say, look, it's a feeless transaction. How can you beat that? So we see companies are coming up with these sorts of things. Of course, is it legit? Is it legal? Is it regulatorily compliant? Those are the issues that these fintechs are going to find. There's a very big fintech now that's about to launch called Abra in the States. They've got tons of VC funding. That's what they're doing. They're just buying Bitcoin locally, selling it internationally in another market. And then if they're lucky, there is a spread that's in their favor and they make money on that. If they're unlucky, then I suppose maybe they restrict that channel or they charge their customers. But that is certainly what is happening.
And the second question is regarding to the manipulation of the blockchain algorithm itself. So, for example, you say if someone who processes 20 files, for example, is rewarded with 1 Bitcoin. Is the algorithm exposed to manipulation? Say I then manipulate that algorithm because it is technology to say for 20 files, processing 20 files, I get 6 Bitcoins. So we don't get to that 2140, it becomes 20, 22, 50, for example.
Yes.
So that's the concept of Bitcoin having value, then it's no longer valid.
Yes, if that was possible, if it were possible to be able to manipulate the algorithms that determine how many Bitcoins get transacted or where they go to, yes, that would greatly diminish the value of the network, the Bitcoin or whatever it was. And this is the things that we are, all these different Bitcoins and different blockchains, different altcoins, they're all trying to figure out. But why Bitcoin was so innovative is because it solved that issue of the ability to now allow volunteers, untrusted people that you don't know, anonymous people, to now come into the network and be able to now process transactions and not able to then change the formulas and change the ways that those transactions are being processed to be able to undermine the technology. That was the innovation that made Bitcoin possible, that decentralized blockchain that needs consensus. All right, that was another word that was an important word here, where that network all has to agree that everything that's going on is by the book. And as soon as a bad actor comes in and tries to manipulate those rules, they will immediately be demolished by the blockchain technology. So what made all this possible was the innovation of the blockchain, and why it is so cool and interesting today, and why we're coming up with all these new concepts, things that we couldn't do before. Because now we have a system that is chaotic, and yet we can regulate, can be self-regulated. Yes, at the back.
How would you deal with issues of confidentiality?
Okay, so this is
Would be seen by different people within the network.
right. Now, this is a very important thing, and it can almost be summed up in the word fungibility. Now, Bitcoin is famous for not being anonymous. It's the word that you use is pseudonymous. Now, pseudonymous means that you know what's going on, but you don't know who's doing what. So in a Bitcoin network, you can do this easily if you go to a website called blockchain.info. What happens is you can actually watch transactions flying around the Bitcoin network, and you can click on that transaction. You can see how much was being sent, what were the fees that were being paid, and also this is interesting, in some cases, the general location of where the person was when they sent that Bitcoin transaction. Not the exact location, but same country. Sometimes even maybe same district, less so. So Bitcoin isn't anonymous, although some cryptocurrencies are coming up and trying to get by that and actually create properly, fully anonymous transactions. Now let's just go back to this whole thing about a blockchain. Now remember, a blockchain is all about participants all coming together and saying, all right, we want to now participate in this network. Now, the way a blockchain works is that, remember when I showed you that ledger being distributed amongst all the participants? So every one of those participants had a full copy of that ledger. So they can actually now, any one of those participants can now go and view this transparent ledger. So what does that mean when you now want to apply a blockchain to a different kind of market, like a securities model? Well, it's very difficult then, to have a security that can now be transacted on a blockchain that should be private and only visible to the persons who are interested in that, and not to the entire network. And so these are the sort of things that are now being trying to be resolved with blockchains. How do we create bring all the value of a blockchain, this sort of decentralized processing where nobody has to trust each other, but also to retain anonymity of transactions? And there's a very famous consortium, a blockchain consortium called R3, which famously brought many banks together, so 60, 70 banks together, biggest banks in the world, and said, all right, let's now get all these banks together to cooperate on a blockchain. And they started developing this blockchain, and it turned out they realized that a blockchain is going to be the wrong solution for this, because you can't have transactions being known by every single participant in that banking consortium. So what they had to do was they sort of had to kind of build technology that had a bit of a blockchain flavor but wasn't technically a blockchain. So this is now why it's going to be difficult, and why I think that Gartner is right when a bit of blockchain bubble is going to pop, because even though it seems exciting, I think that these types of issues are going to start coming up, that it makes no sense having a public, transparent ledger that is shared amongst participants, because very often you want private transactions. Yes, sir?
In terms of the previous example that was used,
Mm.
where it was explained that the exchange actually owns the keys.
Yes.
Okay? There were instances where those keys were actually stolen. Now, some of the exchanges take on the view that all they need to do is restore from backups.
Mm.
They have the same keys, and they want to continue as per normal, and they retain the same value.
Mm.
Now, if everyone took the same view, does that not mean then you've got duplicate bitcoins in circulation, which will decrease the value?
Yeah, so you can't back up, you can't create backups. You can't roll back transactions that occur on a blockchain. Famously, a blockchain called Ethereum did that because a hacker stole a lot of Ether, and the community said, well, that's not cool. We don't want the hacker to have all this money. We want to roll it back. But that's doing a very fundamental change to the ledger itself. One of the most important things about a blockchain is that it's immutable, which means it's unchangeable. That's one of the features. So history is recorded for all time. So if somebody steals that key and steals money off that that address or that account, it's gone. There's no backups. There's no way you can roll back unless you fundamentally change how the blockchain works. So those exchanges, what they try very hard to do is keep those keys in what's called cold storage, which means that they don't actually have those keys available on a database that can be accessed via the internet. They go and print out the keys on paper. Isn't this ironic? A digital currency. They put it on paper, stick it in a safe somewhere. That means nobody can come in and hack unless they break open the safe. That's the best way. But obviously there's other technology, hardware, security modules or something, those sorts of things. And these are the things that now need to come into play. This is now why it's important to, again, think about standards. Right now, these exchanges and these wallets, they're just techies. They're just tech companies saying, all right, I want to now be a Bitcoin company and I want to provide value for people. I want to allow people to store their Bitcoins with me. And they're not thinking like a bank. They don't have the same obligations as a bank to make sure that those keys are secure. And we see these hacks happening all the time. And I think that it's very important, and from your point of view as well, to make sure, remember the position of the virtual currency, the SARB, was that there's no recourse. Don't come to us if somebody steals your money. We're not protecting you. But I think perhaps that might have to change. If large amounts of money are being kept by these companies on behalf of people, there's going to have to be standards in place and things that they have to follow to make sure that their customers' money is kept safe. So that is certainly an avenue of work and study that needs to happen and proaction that needs to take place to be able to not just stand back and say, well, listen, you're on your own. That's not going to help anybody. There's going to be a lot of people who probably will be burnt, and there have been in the past. I think it's important to now try and start introducing those standards to protect people, because right now it's a kind of a wild west, which is unfortunate. Yes, sir.
Two questions. The first one would be, would MasterCard or Visa stop Zenfone from entering this cryptocurrency? Secondly, you mentioned that hacking. Surely there must be some attempts to hack into Bitcoin. Without the Russians have tried to influence the US elections, surely they'll have done that with Bitcoin as well.
Yes, so the first question, MasterCard, Visa, everybody is looking into creating either their own cryptocurrency or using the blockchain to SWIFT. You know, they are actively looking at blockchain, seeing how they can introduce blockchain. So this is an active field. I mean, there's so much money worth of investment, all the CSDs, exchanges, you know, everybody is looking at blockchain right now to see if it will, you know, bring all the value that it's promising. So yes, this is ongoing, and it's very likely that that these companies are going to come up with some kind of blockchain solution, if not their own currency. But remember the issues that I said to you, that people are being driven out of Bitcoin. The issue is with a centralized authority that has governance over this money and is perhaps making the wrong kind of decision, like hyperinflating the currency. So it's not that if Visa came up with a Visa coin, that people would say, oh, well, now there's Visa coin, I don't need Bitcoin. Visa is an established company. They've been around for a long time. We can trust them. Great, we're going to go and shift over to Visa. We're talking about something much more fundamental than that. People are wanting to get out of that kind of system that can be manipulated or perhaps, you know, governed in a way that they do not prefer. So no doubt you are going to see these kinds. I do think that, in fact, there are some countries that are prototyping their own central bank issued crypto coins. And I know Ecuador is doing it, Tunisia, a few others. China said that they were looking at it, but other countries are thinking about issuing their own crypto coins. So no doubt that's going to happen. But what makes Bitcoin attractive is that it's ungoverned and it has a very clear economic model, and that cannot be changed. And people are gravitating towards that. You know, something that cannot be influenced by a human being. You know, because at the end of the day, human beings will let us down. So that's the kind of feeling here. Not that I'm preaching this at all. I'm just trying to give you the sense of why sentiment is moving in this direction. And then the hacking. So yes, of course, you can bet there are people trying to hack Bitcoin. Right now, the market value on Bitcoin, I think the market cap is about 16, 17, 14 billion, somewhere around there, dollars. So if you were able to hack Bitcoin, you could make quite a lot of money, Bitcoin itself. But it's very difficult to do so. Again, that's part of the innovation that made Bitcoin possible, this sort of unhackable network. So what are they targeting? They're not targeting Bitcoin. I mean, they are, but that's not where their hopes and dreams lie. It's more a case of let's target the people who are holding keys on behalf of others, or maybe you write your key down on an email somewhere, or you write it on a piece of paper, or that's where the targets are. Where the keys that are insecure, that's where the effort, and that's where all the money is getting stolen. People who are not looking, and it's because we're naive. We don't have a cool bank that is looking after my keys. It would be great if Absol or FNB came up with a product that said we're going to look after your Bitcoin keys for you. I think that would be quite remarkable. I don't see that as impossible. That could very well happen, and then I can at least trust it. I know that if I know one thing, I'm pretty sure FNB is safer than Luno down in Cape Town. So I'm actually looking forward to that coming up. Yeah. Yes. I think I'm actually done here. So we'll take one more question, and then please contact me. I'm always happy to discuss, especially with you, because I find you very important. Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Question. It's with regards to what's the next. I know we focus a lot on Bitcoin, but what's the next best cryptocurrency, and is there trading between those cryptocurrencies?
Yes. Okay. So the next.
Bitcoin with the other one.
So the next biggest currency out there is what's called Ethereum, Ether. It's also a big public blockchain currency, although they're not going out to be a currency per se. Also, they have issues. For example, they don't have a fixed supply. And also, they are intending to be a smart contract platform, which I'm sure will be discussed later. To be honest, I think that the only currency that is worth anything is Bitcoin. I think all the other currencies that exist are just people are just speculating and just pumping and dumping and going crazy. To me, the only valuable currency that exists today is Bitcoin. So if you want to invest, just think Bitcoin, and don't think about these Ponzi schemes, MMMs, and all that kind of stuff. Don't go there. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for a very interesting presentation and for taking the time. Just as a small personal appreciation. So the irony of
A gold coin.
it's not a gold coin, but it's a special limited edition coin from the SMN. So the irony is not lost on us for giving you.